Niko, I just want to get a little briefly, real quick. We don't have to spend all day on this, but I definitely want to get your opinions on what's going on. Can you show the tweet real quick where we had up Jamie Cheese Slice really quickly about the announcement that Peter Dow is now going to be the campaign manager for good Cheese. There he goes. He's going to be the campaign. I'm very so blessed to have my dear brother Peter Dow as my campaign manager. Right. I welcome him to our campaign and our movement. We will work together for truth and justice. Jill Stein made the announcement that Peter Dow was recruited by her. Peter Dow also just released a tweet earlier today. I think it was the second tweet over there. That was the Jill Stein one. But Peter Dow said there are certain things that he is fighting for. Ironclad commitment to Cornel West will be on the ballot next November. There will be no dropping out and endorsing any Democrat, which is something that a lot of people felt after the Jimmy Dore interview was going to happen. It was almost like, Donald. Here's RFK running as a Democrat, but it felt like Cornel West is being more Democrat-like than actually RFK, who have more of that Tulsi kind of vibe where he's against the party. We are here to oppose the system, not reinforce it. Niko, give me your opinions right now, because I don't think he can fire Peter Dow. And if Peter Dow quits, it's going to make him look even more worse, because now we've already had the debacle with the People's Party and Nick Brana kind of being ushered away. Wouldn't this make him look so indecisive if he fires Peter Dow? And what do you expect from Peter Dow?
So obviously you can't fire him right now. It's a little bit too late for that. I do want to be clear. I do believe in redemption. I don't believe that someone should pay for their sins for the rest of their life if they have genuinely evolved. I do believe that for the most part, Peter Dow probably has genuinely evolved. I think there was a time, just based off of the conversations I have heard him have, where he got to step out of his echo chamber, and then he realized how ridiculous he sounded and how much things were not actually progressing to the degree that he was expecting. And then he saw the Democrats were about to repeat the same mistake in 2019, 2020. I do believe that had played a huge role in his evolution. And he did, to his credit, I know a lot of people keep showing old tweets. To his credit, he did a huge mea culpa. Now, with that being said, that does not mean that motherfucker should have a leadership role in the Green Party campaign of the guy who was working for Bernie, who Peter Dow basically made a career attacking. That's how the majority of us from Twitter know him. It's not saying that he's a bad guy. He has some decent interactions with Pete. But it looks suspect, and at the bare minimum, on the part of strategy, what happened when he made this announcement, when Dr. West made this announcement, bro, it was like a 50-50 thing. No one was really happy about it. They were like, we'll see how it goes. And then there was, fuck this, I'm out. The moment that you hire someone that divisive, in my opinion, Peter should have taken the time and be like, look, man, shit. I mean, I know it's hard to do that because your pride's involved. I don't know what the money, whatever. But look, I'm not saying I'm not going to be a part of the campaign, but maybe it's best for the campaign and for the movement if I take a lesser role out of the public eye. Maybe as an advisor, because and he should be understanding as to why people feel that way. We're not that far removed from 2016, 2017. We're not that far removed. We remember. And there are people who don't believe his change is genuine, and they have a right to feel that way until otherwise proven. And then it's like you also just left Marianne Williamson's campaign. Somebody said he was fired, but he wasn't fired. He left. I don't know why he left. I believe it's because Marianne Williamson proved to be exactly who we thought she was. But my issue also just strategically with the hiring is this. Cornel West's biggest weakness, from a strategic standpoint, outside of messaging, whatever, is he lacks political awareness. He does not know how to read the room at times. He just he can't make the predictions that you or I or Tulsi or even RFK Jr. can make. He doesn't know how to work. It's a problem for him, right? The same way he can say, "Oh, Tucker's the biggest white supremacist ever," and he's not a brother. He's might as well be kicking. But then you say, "My good brother Anderson Cooper, you're doing such a good job." That don't make no damn sense. Read the room. Peter Dow obviously has that exact same problem. So you're not actually putting somebody in a position of power that can influence you in a positive way. in an impactful way, strategically speaking. That's like, if you're gonna, that's like a big thing, right? If you're gonna hire people, they need to have a skill set that covers down for something that you may lack skill in. And that is not what we're seeing with the hiring of Peter Dow. His political instincts are trash at best.
So what do you think the campaign was thinking when they hired him?
Jill Stein suggested it.
Yeah.
She came out literally like 2 hours ago.
Yeah. What was she thinking? Like, let's get Peter Dow in here because maybe we can change course and get you this type of message. I'm asking you to guess and get in the mind of the campaign, but I can't even piece together how this would be helpful because of that, like you said, the questioning of him being with the Clinton initiative, the IDF, situation, and also COVID. Yeah.
Oh, you got it. Yeah. So she said there was something she actually said before this where she literally said, I'm the one who suggested it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And she said that it's because she understands what it's like from her past experiences, how hard it is to campaign without a campaign manager. Right. And then she goes on to quote Peter Dow. She said she doesn't know if Peter Dow in his days is DNC defender, but it's not hard to see how a war-torn, bloody childhood led to fierce opposition of Bush. And like, I get that. Like, but at the same time, what does that have to do with one, just qualification speaking? Like, I just don't think that he has the political force at the manage campaign. But two, why do you have to put him in a leadership position? What does us forgiving him have to do with putting him in a leadership position of probably at this point one of the most important movements? Because like it's on the back end of everybody being disjointed. This is once again why I always say, motherfucker, Jill Stein should have just ran again. That's how I keep saying that. She should just ran again. I'm tired of dealing with these Howard Hawkins and these Peter Dow situations, and then Cornel's like in this weird thing with Jimmy. And if Jill was running, we wouldn't be having these conversations. We'd be like, oh, just fuck it, everybody get behind Jill. Like that's what would be happening. But he shouldn't have been a leader, bro. Like that's my gripe. Like I believe that he could be redeemed. He could genuinely have evolved, and still, you don't put him in charge of a campaign like this with so much on the line, not only for Cornel West, especially once we don't know what's going to happen with Biden right now.
Yeah,
we don't know. Shit's crazy, but the movement is on the line, and so you put someone who is partially responsible for fracturing the movement and smearing the movement, and attacking leaders of the movement in charge of a campaign in which the movement is largely riding on in the views of a lot of people. It just doesn't make any sense, strategically speaking.
So this interview that happened between Jimmy and Cornel West brought people to tears. They were really upset by this, right? There's people that they saw that we had a lot of hope within. And I can tell you, I can only speak for myself. You spoke to Jimmy today. The video is out, guys. Go to Mi Casa Su Casa, Niko's YouTube page. You can check it out over there. Any other places that they can check it out, let everybody know. But I think it's on there. Sure. Yeah. I'm going to tell you the difference between, and this is the thing, just like, Jimmy Dore recently did not get a loving message from Cornel West on his Twitter saying, thank you for the conversation, Jimmy, go watch the video. I didn't get one of those either, right? And I can speak to my frustration, right? When I interviewed him, it didn't get as heated, but like I opened up saying, thank you, Cornel West, for the past. You are one of my political heroes. You once showed me, you said a long time ago, and I took your cue to go and talk to the person who ideologically thought different than me. It's okay. You shouldn't participate in cancel culture. And I thought that was always great about Cornel West. But the thing that's frustrating to me today is that he's not understanding if you are going to run for president, then your job is to get as many votes as possible, right? You're not running to be the president of the progressive.
If you're trying to win, yeah.
You're running for president. You got to understand the voters. And I don't want to look down on voters and stuff or smash them over the head. But let's just say a lot of them are normies that are not in the political bubble like ours. So to me, when he does lead with the white supremacy argument, or he does talk about it a lot, that can be confused by the people, even though, they don't understand what white supremacy is. They confuse it as whiteness. And how many times they were beat over the head being told that they're privileged. Meanwhile, most white people in America are poor, can't pay their rent, can't get, a roof over their head, and can't put food on the table. So to me, the frustration lies is the fact that he is moving away from the populist movement, and he's moving more towards this message that only allows him to get a small amount of people. And I think that's where you see a lot of frustration come in from people like me. I'm not going to speak for Jimmy with his frustration. I'll speak for my own. But that is my biggest criticism of Dr. West. It's not that it's not important to talk about those issues, right? But you have to understand when you say that, how confusing that is to the voters out there, to the people of America, because they don't get it. And it's better to grab them where they're at on our common goal, which is that the oligarchy hates us all, right? That's never been more clear, Niko, than now with COVID. And we come together on that issue and then work our way into talking about the history of white supremacy, which is the economic, system that was on the backs of 400 years of slavery, where white people were able to get, ancestry gains that are now been taken away from them right now because the people running shit are Malthusians. And the whole message is you'll have nothing and like it, So that is my frustration with Cornel West. And I'd like you to give me your opinion before we jump into one of these videos really quickly of Garland Nixon. Go ahead.
So my issue is not with him discussing white supremacy. And I don't even think that necessarily speaking, that discussing white supremacy or like the reality in and of itself would only get a few people, but it's obviously not going to get enough people. My problem is, and it's the same thing I talked about with Jimmy on the show earlier. I said, what you're telling me is what you're fighting against. However, I don't know what Dr. West is fighting for, right? Why do you think Tulsi was so popular? Tulsi could tell us what she was fighting for. Bernie could tell us even in his messaging what he was fighting for. Even Trump can tell us what he was fighting for, right? A candidate's message will fail every single time if you're just railing about what you're fighting against. And just from a humanistic standpoint, it also makes you far easier to manipulate. And it makes it far more difficult to discern who your allies are and are not. Because if I'm just fighting against something, then a person can be perceived as my ally by just agree. Yeah, I'm fighting against that too. And I have no idea what that person stands for or what they're fighting for. You get what I'm saying? But when you're fighting for something, Pasta, for example, how do you and I and Fee and the like see immediately through January 6th? Immediately. Because we know we're fighting.
I was there.
Well, yeah, obviously. So there's that. But even still, you can literally just like that. Like that's a fed up because I know what we're fighting for, and therefore I know who my adversaries are. Because no matter if it's from the Democrats or the Republicans, neoconservatives, neoliberals, what they call themselves that day, black, gay, white, I know what I'm fighting for. Therefore, you cannot as long as I keep that with that focus in mind, you can't pretend to be my ally. Because I don't care what you're fighting against. First, tell me what you're fighting for, and then I'll let you know if we can get on the same page. Yeah. And Dr. West is too busy fighting against. And I understand we had a conversation. It's very easy to be a jaded black man in this country, bro. I get it. And I'm not. And I said during the interview, like I will never tell because you can't have that race conversation. Excuse me, you can't have a class conversation without race. The reason why I say that is specifically because like I always use the metaphor. It's a car. The classism is the car, and if racism is the tire, sexism is the engine, like whatever. But your car isn't moving if you don't fix all the parts. But there is an order that you can fix them in and still get the car on the road. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
And especially we're talking about strategy, like just from a purely strategic standpoint. If we're talking about strategy, you better figure out what's going to get your car on the road the fastest, and work your way from there. I'm 100% in the camp of there is no class. You cannot fight the class war without acknowledging racism, because racism was used to wage the class war. So you can't ignore it. Like because how many times do we see people fall into the trap? Oh, now you don't want to. You get what I'm saying? They fall to the trap of racism, and now we get to arguing about what is and what isn't racist instead of focusing on class work. That's so yeah, you can't. So now we do have to have the understanding, but at the end of the day, the class part does have to take precedence. And then when I'm talking about class via the pandemic, for example, now I can bring up how many black businesses were obliterated due to the pandemic and how it's not being paid attention to because of the people, because of whose businesses they were. And then I start to talk about FDR and how his policies actually hurt black people more than anybody else. And because now, once again, I know what I'm fighting for. And I don't give a fuck if FDR is a goddamn Democrat. I don't give a shit if they call him Democratic Socialist, whatever the fuck. I know what I'm fighting for, and all that propaganda is not going to work on me. So now when I'm talking to a conservative that may be thinking about voting for Dr. West, I could tell him exactly what he wants to hear about FDR, which is the truth in a lot of cases, but also explain, now here's where my struggles come from. And I was like, oh shit, damn, I didn't even think about that. Man, that happened to you? Well, this happened to me because of this person's policy. So now I can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. And the same way that, you know, class is connected to race, but if you bring everybody's class up, you help the racial issue too as well. And I think it's also important to point out that, and because Dr. Cornel West mentioned white elites, you know what I'm saying? That's the focus you want to have right there, because those white elites are the same one who don't care a shit about anybody when it came to COVID, and they want us all dead. You know what I'm saying? And I think when you see like people like me and Jimmy, we have this mindset that it's the workers versus the oligarch, and we have to go there first, and then we can bring in the other, you know, other part where it's the ruling class. But really quickly, Niko, I just want to make a point. That's why it's so frustrating is the second part is this kind of like, I don't know, kind of like cherry picking of what fascism really is. The true definition of fascism, right, is corporations merging with the state. It's the elites. It's the ruling class. It's the 1%. When you start talking about neo-fascism, and instead of just saying, you know, like, you know, I told him if I had a gun to my head and I had to vote for either Donald Trump or Joe Biden going back, I would have voted for Donald Trump easily because Biden's been that much of a disaster, right? He should just be going with the message, I was wrong, and stop trying to twist the term fascism. You know, he even mentioned in the beginning of your interview, once again, the transfer of power again. And that's kind of lending credence to the CIA mentality and rhetoric that January 6th was a real try to take over the government. He's kind of fishing over there rather than saying, I was wrong. Don't vote for either of these guys. Don't vote for a Republican and Democrat. Vote for me. And he still wants to still kind of play with one foot in the door where he's almost. And
he started to, as our conversation continued, he was kind of getting like, as I started, because there's a way. Pops, remember that conversation we had? I'm like, y'all gonna laugh about this conversation, but I talk about it all the time. You probably don't know I talk about it, but I talk about it all the time. Pops had this conversation with me after a debate that I had with somebody. I don't remember who it was. And he said, Niko, man, you won that debate. And I was like, oh, I appreciate it. He's like, but I want to tell you something real quick. You know, white people are weird whenever black guys get emotional, and it's nothing to do with you or the facts or anything. They will make you emotional so that you, because of how white people will and sometimes inherently view a black person, how much harder it is to impress them, to convince them that you, like of your side of the argument. If you even move 1 inch emotionally, they will think that it's because you think that you're wrong, and now all of a sudden you're picking up. He said, so the next time you debate a white guy, if they start to get more emotional, get calmer. And my world was blown. I've been debating my entire life. Part of debating is emotion for me, but there is also like a time and a place and when to use it. And guess what started happening after I started applying that theory? Like way I talk to them, they would get calmer. And I can't tell you how many rage quits I've had, or people who try to.
I think that was the anomaly debate, by the way.
Huh?
I think it was the anomaly debate, and then after that debate, everything. I think it was, because then I remember you debating somebody from the somebody from a Green Party candidate in Washington that hated Tulsi, and it was a great debate, and it was really calm. You got a lot of stuff through. Opie lost his shit, and you were really calm. It was his name, Opie, the other guy.
Ben Burgess, Hunter Avalon. Like literally, there's people they've quit because they try to. But my point in saying that is there is a way to communicate. You have to know your audience. And like, especially we're talking about politics and game theory and all that stuff, you got to know who you're talking to and how to talk to them. And I just feel like Dr. West at times is not like recognizing that reality. Like maybe because it could be because of his circle. Maybe that could be like influencing him more than what he wants to admit, because he did come from that Harvard academic circle. But like, I don't have a problem saying that Trump is racist and has been racist and has said racist stuff. But I also, because of that, have zero problem saying Biden has been worse. And because I can tell you in specific ways for both people, how Biden has been worse and how I still have a problem with a lot of what Trump has done. It's just the way that you say it and how you're saying it too, because my goal is to have the message received. Is your goal to argue? Is your goal to convince yourself that you're morally righteous, more morally righteous than somebody else? Or is it to be heard, have your message received, have that message internalized and then considered? Because that's what my goal is when I'm talking to somebody. It's now Dr. West, and I had this conversation with Jimmy too. I'm like, now for Dr. West, because what he said on Twitter today, I had to shake my head. I love Dr. But that little the jab that he took whenever Dr. Stein came out and said that she was the one behind the Peter Dow hiring. Like, and then he basically took a jab at Jimmy saying like, oh, it's about getting attention for himself. But I'm like, what the fuck do you think Tim Black did by responding to that shit? Like, he has no idea how bad Tim Black has been on the issues because Tim Black agrees with him. So now we're getting, so your goal is just to have, like, to only talk to or agree with or bolster or boost people who agree with you? Because that's not how you win an election.
Yeah. And I think why people are just questioning why RFK and the interviews with Jimmy, because Jimmy was very common, of course, too, as well. But he also brought out the Israeli stuff, and that stuff went viral.
Yeah,
I went and asked him first. Yeah, I went and asked him first. Mm-hmm. But the thing about it is that there is some still strategic avenue in which you can support an RFK campaign, in my personal opinion, because he's talking to the populace and he's working it. Those little videos we played in the beginning, he is churning them out into the normies. That's so effective. I've been still waiting for Dr. Cornel West to get going, and I'm like saying, what are you doing? I think there's a sense of frustration, and that's why you see the two different type of energy towards two different kind of candidates. Like I said, I'm not going to speak for Jimmy. I'm always speaking for myself because I wanted to see Cornel West do well and kick ass and have a populist message. But it's like he has no conscience, Niko, of any existential threat out there. COVID, CBDCs, bioweapons. This guy is completely lost. And he still doesn't want to get on it. And it's so frustrating.
I feel like Jimmy's sadder than you are, bro. I know you said you're not speaking with Jimmy, but Jimmy probably wanted it more than you did. Jimmy loved Cornel West, bro. He has been depressed over this. He said it on my show. He said it in text message, phone call. And it's not just him, bro. I was so down this week. I'm like, what the fuck is going on, bro? And I was expecting, maybe it's my naivete, like maybe because I'm young and I see Dr. West as an elder, a wise elder. Like, okay, Dr. West is going to respond in a way that I've seen him respond in the past with people he disagrees with. And even though Jimmy responded, I told Jimmy he was being petty by doing what he did, he's campaigning for Biden 45. I'm like, well, no, you kind of put him in a corner where it's like you're having him choose between Trump and Biden, and like he's running against both of them. Whatever. But at the same time, I expected West to be better because you're running for president. That's what I told that to Jimmy. I said, no offense, Jimmy. Cornel West can't react like you. He can't react emotionally like you. You're Jimmy. You're not running for president. You're a fucking jack-off comedian with a show on YouTube. And of course, you're going to lose your temper from that. Like, okay, are the consequences as grand as if Cornel West gets it wrong? No. If Cornel West reacts emotionally in situations such as these, who has greater consequences to the movement? It's Dr. West because he's running for president. And so now you're putting, it's just I expected more in the way Dr. West has reacted. And I do understand it. I understand where he's coming from. And I talked about it during the interview. I really do. But you as a black man, that's what I'm talking about. Like, bro, how we have a very short leash. Like, that's the reality of it. You can't mess up. I don't get to be wrong on my takes. I talk about this shit all the time. I don't get to be Kyle Kalinske, bro. I don't get to be fucking the what do they call him? Vanguard. Like I can't be that. I can't be wrong. I can't be Jackson Hinkle and be wrong all the way to the top. I get 2, maybe 3 major fuck ups, and that's it. People might not hear from me for a year because I'm blacklisted. Why? Niko messed up once. Dr. West, doesn't matter how many degrees you have. Doesn't matter if you work for Harvard. Doesn't matter if you work for Bernie. It does not. You should have witnessed that from Tulsi being a woman of color and being a woman in general. She didn't get too many chances to mess up before people immediately came up with the reason to count her out. So just please stop giving people reasons to doubt that you're a serious candidate, knowing what you know and knowing that, like the conversation that we've had. Please, please.
The most amazing thing was the one time Jimmy was agreeing with him, going like this, and in all fairness, he was like, "We're going to get a truth council together." I'm like, we know, we've been watching this in real time. There's been plenty of discussion around this whole thing. You don't have to get a truth council. You can just go back and watch the reruns and find out everything you want to know. But then Jimmy's giving him the fist, saying, "Yeah," and he goes and says, "Well, you know, to be honest with you, that's not my greatest concern over here." It's like, what are you doing, dude? What are you doing?
Yeah,
you just leave it at that. I'm gonna have a truth council. That's what I'm gonna do. And Jimmy's like, "Way to go, thank you." He like kicked himself in his own dick there. He went out of his own way to fucking trash himself after Jimmy was giving him the fist. I'm like, oh my God, what is this guy's problem?
It's crazy because
you're not serious over here. You're not, and that's. But listen, Niko, my engineer editor cut up together these takes. He did some work. I don't want to leave him out in the snow. Let's bring up with the first clip really quick of Garland Nixon, and then I want your opinion on Garland's take of this whole interview right here.
Had to happen. The contradictions that Jimmy Dore exposed inadvertently had to happen. They were inevitable. They were a good thing. Don't get upset about it. Don't get mad about it. They had to happen. Let's use two words: reform, revolution. The revolutionary wants massive change. The person who wants a revolution wants bottom-up change. They want dramatic change, right? So a revolutionary change wants to change the system. We don't have to use the word revolutionary. That may freak some people out. It doesn't matter what language you use. Systemic change, right? Jimmy, Garland, look at this and say this system's rotten to the core and it's predatory. We believe the system is out here to rape, rob, kill, and do every terrible thing we can imagine. So we want systemic change. The reformer actually, believe it or not, wants to save and preserve the system. They want to reform the system that we have. They believe that it's corrigible, that it's salvageable. So the reformer says, look, the system's fine, the system's great, we got a wonderful system. You bring me in, I'll tweak it, and it'll work better. RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, and Cornel West, put them all together in a bunch. Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. are running in the system. They're not running as outsiders. Cornel West believes the government's doing the right thing. They're trying to help us. They're acting for the general welfare, right? And there are those of us who are like, no, they never do that. Get out of here with that. Jimmy ran into that, and he got angry and frustrated. And it's an anger and frustration that is valid. So what you look at is three various reformers. And Jimmy Dore doesn't want reform. And a lot of us don't have any confidence that we can reform a system that has this level of corruption. So you're talking about a reform candidate. And I'm not downing or denigrating RFK Jr. There are things I like about him. There's things I don't like. But the problem is this: the system is not going to tolerate RFK Jr. even trying to reform it. Ain't going to tolerate that. So he says, saying the system needs to be reformed. I'm a reformer. He can't clash with Jimmy Dore and people like me who are saying we need systemic change. Marianne Williamson, same thing. She's a reformer, just a different level reformer. If I did it, I would bring up contradictions. I bring up things that you can't run from. But I understand what Jimmy's doing because Jimmy, I'm a geopolitical analyst. That's what I do. I do foreign policy, international conflict, things like that. And Jimmy Dore is a guy who's really, really good at what he does. He's a comedian. He's a voice for people who are angry. He's funny, and he covers as much stuff as he can, very broad stuff, but he's not as intricately detailed in a lot of the things that he covers. I don't know much about, but that's my area of expertise and my specialty, right? So I would bring up these issues and point out the contradictions and have Marianne Williamson and have RFK Jr. and have Cornel West, where there's a pocket between the contradictions. The U.S. is saying this, but they're doing this. You're in the middle saying it's okay. The U.S. is doing one thing, and our government is doing one thing, and have a history of doing one thing. How can you believe they're doing the right thing now? Those things don't add up. It comes across as naive or ignorant. But these are the kinds of contradictions that need to be introduced to these people. You have to lay it out like that. And I know that Jimmy was very, very angry and frustrated because he was talking to reformers and he wants systemic and revolutionary change. And you had people who are simply saying we need to reform this system in one way or another. He's a guy who's like me and probably you, says, I don't trust these people as far as I can throw them. They're up to no good every time. And he was talking to various candidates who were saying, well, yeah, they're up to no good in this particular area, but in this area over here, they're doing the right thing, which is inconsistent.
Did you able to catch that, Niko? The reform versus
I could. That was pretty crazy, but Pastor Nixon was preaching. That Pastor Nixon was preaching the gospel. I could not have said it any better. Especially he's like, Jimmy's getting mad because he's a revolutionary talking to reformers. It's like almost like he wasn't aware of that at the time. But and to be fair, it's because of Williamson and Dr. West portrayed themselves as being revolutionaries when it is looking more and more likely that they are indeed reformers, unfortunately. So that's Garland. Let me just say, it took y'all long enough to fucking figure out who the hell Garland was. It took him way too long to get this famous. It took him way too goddamn long. Y'all should have been known who Garland was. I've been saying that shit since I first talked to Garland. I'm like, yo, how the fuck is this man not the most popular guy in independent media? I'm so confused. Now, granted, Garland wasn't the best with technology at first, so maybe it took him a bit to catch up. But Garland has been that guy, and I always call him because he's always supported me, and he's like the first guy at like his age that I've seen that is just never wrong. I have not heard a wrong take from Garland since I've been in independent media, which has been since about 2015, 2016. Now, obviously, that's not the entirety of his life, but like this man literally stepped down from the ACLU because he is a revolutionary. When he realized that they were not that, he left when they went against it. But Dr. West, what he is saying is when it comes to that particular issue, like would Dr. West have stepped down from the ACLU? Right? Because he would want to reform it. I'm the type that probably would have walked away too. Garland is speaking from a position that it's sympathetic. Honestly, it's sympathetic and it's empathetic because like he's not blaming anybody. He's not placing blame, and which is what I like most about it. He's like, I'm just telling y'all what it is. It doesn't mean it's not fair. I understand why Jimmy was angry. It's all about the perception of what you were expecting versus what you got. And maybe because I wasn't expecting them to be revolutionary. I wasn't expecting Cornel West to be revolutionary. Maybe like that's pessimistic, but I just was never expecting that. So maybe that's why I was able to keep my cool and talk to him. And Jimmy probably had a different expectation. So that could be it, honestly.
Yeah. Because you think he's a revolutionist, but then he's kind of like not even just bowing down to the system the way RFK is. Like RFK is just a reformist through and through. He wants to go back to the FDR type of Democrat, right? When he grew up in the system where he believed that capitalism and democracy was the greatest thing in the world. He even talks about it. We were the beacon of democracy, of true democracy. He believes the system can just be fixed again. And I think you can accept that and move on where you're expecting more from Cornel West, that he's going to come third party outside the whole system and smash it down. But then yet you get even, like I said, I feel like he acts more of a Democrat than RFK does sometimes by kind of like bowing down to the fact that at the end of the day, I'm still going to pivot to that Biden was better than Trump. And it was okay to do that because we have to stop the impending fascism. And that's very frustrating. Play the last one that says language, and then we'll get you on out of here, Niko.
Sounds good.
His point was valid about how the importance of language. Language is important and critical. It's critical how you communicate to people, the terms you use, the phrases you use, how they connect to what you're saying, right? Why they believe you. Jimmy Dore understands intuitively that when you use the language of this violent, oppressive, imperialist, colonialist, murderous group, that people will associate you with them. When you use the language of Tony Blinken and Joe Biden, people will hear the language of Tony Blinken and Joe Biden, and they will associate with you with them, regardless of what your intents are. That's what people are going to do. That's the reality. So when Jimmy Dore hears Cornel West using the language that the Bidens and the Blinkens use, he intuitively knows, and he basically says to Cornel, look, man, if you use their language, people, everyday schmucks like me and Garland, will tend to associate with these people and you won't have success. I think what he was telling Cornel West, look, I like you, Cornel. You're a good guy, man. You got a good heart. We hear you talk about the Palestinians. We hear you say, when we see the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese, that we can't see bad, evil people. We have to see our precious brothers, right? That's good stuff. It's great. But what Jimmy was trying to get across to him was, look, use the language of an oppressive group. People are going to associate you with that. But why did he use the language? And why did Jimmy hear? Jimmy speaks the language that I speak, right? I know what it's like to be extremely poor, and I understand the language that you use and the worldview that you have when you're extremely poor. And I understand the language of the middle class and the upper class. I understand those languages because I've traveled throughout those groups, right? And I understand the frustration of hearing that upper class language and understanding that working people ain't going to bite that hook, right? And that's what Jimmy was trying to get to Cornel West. But why does Cornel West use that language? Where did Cornel West go to school? Yale. Where else? Harvard, Princeton. When we see these people, right? We see monsters. We see neoliberal thieves and bastards. That's what we see when we see these people, right? When Cornel West sees them, he sees his classmates. He sees his alumni from the same college that he does. He speaks their language, and he doesn't speak a different language. He's using the language of the, let's just say the language of the oppressor. And I don't mean oppressor of black people. I mean oppressor of the world, right? The neoliberals. And if you went to Harvard and Yale and Princeton, you taught at Harvard, you're going to speak Harvardese. Let me show that. That's brilliant. Let's talk off that. Cornel West language hasn't changed in 30 years. It's not his fault that the Democrats co-opted that same language. Man, we have some brilliant people. Exactly his point. Cornel West has been saying this stuff for the last 30 years. Why? Because he meant it. The neoliberals they looked and they're like, people are saying that other people are being treated fair, that the little guy ain't getting fair. We'll take that. We'll co-opt that. Then we'll pretend that we're standing for the little guy and human rights, and then we'll utilize that to oppress the whole damn world. He's walking around saying the stuff that he says. I agree or not, whatever. He said it out from his heart. But the neocons took it and twisted it into we're the good guys when they ain't. But being a guy who's from the same place, he lived in the same, he stayed in the same circles as them, he has the same worldview in some ways. So it comes from his background. It comes from the fact that he's a Harvard and Yale and Princeton guy. And Jimmy and I ain't. People always say, well, Garland, you're speaking in a very simple way that's easy to understand because that's how I grew up. Right? And Jimmy's similar. I'm similar. We just say what we got to say. We're easy to understand because we're not using fancy words. We avoid that. Cornel West, again, he speaks like a poet. right? And it sounds beautiful and poetic, but at times it's a little philosophical and deep. And at times, if you listen to Cornel West, you know, you got to have a PhD to kind of grasp what he's really saying. Jimmy Dore was saying, look, the language you're using, man, you're going to scare the octopus crap out of the working class and the working poor and the poor. And it frustrated Cornel West, because he was like, look, what's wrong with that? This is what I say. This is what I believe in. It's the only language you're asking a man who only speaks Chinese to speak Russian. It ain't happening. And you're going to get frustrated because you're using the wrong language, the language of the oppressor and the neocons and the imperialists, whatever term you want to use for these neocons. And he's going to get frustrated because he doesn't have another language to use. He doesn't have another option. That are like be asking me to speak Cornel Westian, which probably I kind of maybe could, but he couldn't speak this.
Harvardese, Niko, is that going to be affected speaking that language over there? I mean,
man, look,
I think it's counterproductive, and that is the problem. Go ahead.
Garland is he's spitting. I like maybe probably that's why I can relate to Garland so much, and I feel the same way. Like, I can speak Harvardese, if you will. Like, literally, I was surrounded by the people at University of North Carolina. Like, I was in debate at the college level. And when I'm around them, that's how I can talk and sometimes do talk. However, I also can speak and understand, like, Jimmy, for example, because of how I grew up. So when you can seamlessly translate between the two, you can see immediately where the breakdown happens. Like I could once Jimmy said, I laugh about it because I knew. I mean, he said, because I wanted to coach you, I wanted to educate you. I said, oh my God, Jimmy, did not just say that shit. Please don't tell me you just said that to a Black Harvard educated professor who has zero idea that you just mean you literally just wanted to provide an education on an issue. Don't tell me, because I knew immediately, bruh, I was halfway listening. I said, oh, what the fuck? He gonna educate who? Like, I knew that doctor, and I didn't teach at Harvard. I don't got a PhD. And I knew me now, but because of my other experience, I know, like, oh, that's just Jimmy using plain talk. Because Jimmy doesn't know how Dr. West would perceive that. But on the other side of that fence, Dr. West, if I'm gonna be honest, and this is the one point that I'm positive this, I hope he considers it. Have you considered that you are not as attached to the working class as you should be, the class that you are fighting for, as you should be? Are you as in tune with them? Because Jimmy's anger, although can be sometimes misguided, it's also righteous. And if you were attached to the working class to the degree you'd be like, you know, I can understand how he had some, you know, conversational missteps, if you were, some colloquial missteps. I can understand that because, motherfucker, I would be mad too the way the world's been going lately. I get it. I'm not even going to hold it against him because that's how I would perceive it because of where I've come from. But like Garland said, when Cornel West hears or sees this, sees Anderson Cooper or talks to all those are his classmates, like almost in some cases, literally his classmates. And it's hard for him to break out of that circle and to see them for what they are when to be frank, you were literally part of that circle. It got you to where you are. It gained you the respect, the adulation that a lot of Black men yearn for after being told they're not good enough their entire lives. You finally got that validation and acknowledgement, but when the working class is talking, are you listening and can you understand them? Because like I said, the way that it was handled after, I just am not a fan of. And I know people are like, oh, what Jimmy, I already talked to Jimmy about it. I explained what my problem was with the way Jimmy handled it, but at the same time, I expected Dr. West to handle it better because of who he showed us to be in the past.
Yeah. And people are now just reading some of the stuff in the chat too as well. And look, I don't want to beat up on the voters or the citizens of America, but I think when Jimmy was trying to make that point about who you're trying to speak to, and, you know, Garland Nixon pointed so well, you know, you sometimes come off, you know, like in this kind of elitist bubble of sorts that you're talking to these people from Harvard and whatnot. And, you know, by the way, North Carolina is definitely going to lose to the Hurricanes this year. When you're speaking to these people on that level, I mean, I don't want to say the words dumb it down, right? But we understand why Donald Trump connected with so many people, right? He was speaking at a simple, basic level,
basic
very slow, Niko, taking his time. Like, that's who's voting over here.
She's an idiot. She's stupid. What can I say? She's an idiot. Like, very plain. Like, No, there's no need to mince words, and people appreciate it. Like, bro, why you talking to me like, you know what I'm saying?
You're
like,
running for president. That's who you got to convince. And that's where it's got to be. Niko, an hour and a half is here. Let everybody know where they can find you, what you got going on. We love you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been too long. I'm glad I wore my Niko shirt.
You got to undo one more button though. But yeah, I'm back on YouTube. Just look up Niko House. I'm on Rokfin as well. Hotspot. Go check out Hotspot. Go follow us on Twitter. The Twitter handle is Hotspot. And my Twitter handle obviously is still Real Niko House, and I'm on Instagram as well, Real Niko House, and TikTok as well. Go check out the content I've been putting up out there. I've been actually putting more content out there than YouTube lately, but that's going to change. I'm gonna be streaming more, as you can see from the last 2 interviews. Yeah, man, it was good to be on though. I hope this shit get reconciled, because this was like, bro, I was all like, oh man, this Jimmy and Cornel West finally talking. This is about to be, oh shit, damn, oh, did not need this week, bro. I was stressed all weekend. Girl looking at me like, what's wrong? I'm like, man, I don't want to talk about it, man. She thought my damn dog died or some shit. Like,
it was depressing in a way, but I hope people straighten it out, and let's see where Cornel West's campaign goes. I really think it's on him, But at the end of the day, Jimmy's not running for president, right? He understands where he's coming from.
We needed it, and if anything, for no other reason than that analysis that Garland gave, right? Like, there's for some reason there's a miscommunication going on and a misunderstanding, a genuine, not this bullshit like where Crystal and Kyle or those type of people pretend to be act purposely obtuse. Like, that's not what we're talking about. There was a genuine miscommunication between 2 people who usually agree on the issues, and we need to understand why. Because otherwise our movement cannot go forward, because we do need those academics. Like, we still need them. We can't pretend like they're not important. If for no other reason than to understand how academics think, right? But we still need the workers too, going forward. And I do got to say, before we get up out of here, I am very, very I'm very proud of Jimmy. We had a conversation, and at the end of that conversation, if you haven't looked at it, go check out. It's on my my channel right now, my YouTube channel. He said that he absolutely acknowledges that he could have racial blind spots. No, he said he absolutely does. He's sure of it, he said. And because he judges a lot of things off of his personal experiences. And he said, which I was kind of caught off guard by it, and he had no reason to say it, because it's not like he's in the best mood with Dr. West at the moment. But he said, you know what though? If I was born a black man, I would spend all my time talking about those problems also. He said, if I was born a black man, I would spend all my time, because he acknowledges how much of his conversations are driven by his personal experiences. So for him to say something like that, that's powerful. That means, like, Dr. West, he's not ignoring the struggle that we know full well exists. He's speaking from a strategic perspective, and it may have came across wrong, but it is in no way delegitimizing your experience or the experiences of marginalized people. And I personally appreciate Jimmy saying that, because I have never heard him say anything like that before. So I really appreciated that.
Well, that sometimes could be the quagmire, right? How do we not have a blind spot, and we are understanding, even though we are so concentrating on it's the workers versus the oligarch, how do we make sure that we understand the plight and what people went through in this country for many years? A lot of the infrastructure built, we talk about white supremacy, was built on 400 years of slavery, right? Where a lot of people were able to take advantage of. My friend says all the time, I didn't get my 40 acres and a mule. However, we do also have to realize what's going on too today. And those same white supremacists, they've showed their whole ass when it came to the COVID, and they don't give a damn about anybody. They want us all dead. You were saying in the beginning of this interview too as well. They want you dead. They don't care. It's a lot easier. In fact, you're a useless eater. Get out of my face over here. We don't need you. And I think there is a commonality which we can come together, but not having those blind spots and understanding what we went through to get here. And I think that is the key. And I said before, I said at the end of the last show,
picks up the phone. Possibly, hey man, real quick, am I being dumb? he just calls me because he knows I'm like, and if I tell him, I'll give him my perspective on it, and then he moves forward. Like, because literally, if I have a problem with a woman, I'll call my mom, I'll call my sister, I'll call like, hey man, am I being crazy? Like, that's okay. Like, we're all fallible. If we're all limited by our experiences, and therefore you can't learn until you ask. Like, that's just how it goes. And I would say for Dr. West, challenging white supremacy is all well and good, but you do know that white supremacy can't take the form of a black man or a black woman or a Hispanic man or Hispanic woman that is being used as a tool for white supremacy. And just saying, a lot of the circles that you've ran in the past, or those people that you call brother and sister, are tools of the very same white. I mean, look at Kamala. I mean, damn, like literally, we have a living metaphor in the White House right now, a literal tool for white supremacy who puts on blackface every time it's time to run for a fucking election. And she's a tool for white supremacy that you refuse to acknowledge as such. And therefore, white supremacy under Biden and Kamala is being facilitated cryptically.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we just have to understand what that word sounds like in a lot of people's mind, right? You know, it's just, it's since it's been weaponized and used for political cover for so long, the whole privilege thing, it just makes people feel like, okay, now I got to feel guilty for where and how I was born. I had no fucking say or choice in that. What the hell do you want me to do? And it kind of throws us into this quagmire. And once again, I said, it's not important to talk about, but at the end of the day, the most commonality is us versus the oligarchs. They want us all dead. Let's come together on that, and then we can have those discussions. Let's get them in first. Let's get them to sit down at the table. It's just tactic, like you said, and then we work our way.
You also don't have to say white supremacy to talk about white supremacy. Like, you literally do not have to talk. I talk about white supremacy all the time, and I rarely use a word.
You don't have to. Yeah.
If you're doing it right,
great at that. You know, Cynthia McKinney. Another
it's
great
like
one.
Whenever we talk about the deep state, for example, we don't have to. If depending on our audience, because you have to be aware of your audience, right? We don't have to say deep state when we're going into detail about the deep state. The story will tell itself, and you'll know it's the deep state without me ever having to say the word. But also, if you're a newer type of audience, I'm not going to scare you away by throwing out a word that you associate with conspiracy theorists, quote unquote, right? Yeah. It's just, you got to know your audience. It's part of the game, bro. Just you got to play it. It sucks. I know. It's annoying. I know. People should know. People shouldn't react. People shouldn't be emotional, but that's not the fucking world we live in. People do react. People are reactionary. They are emotional as shit, and they do react viscerally. It's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in. We got to operate within those parameters. So, yeah. Appreciate you, Pasta. Let me get up out of here.
Love you, Niko. See you soon. Tell Rio I love it, and I'll be coming to see Rio soon.
Bet. Got you. Peace.
You got it, Niko. Niko House, ladies and gentlemen. Me, Casa, Sue Casa, one of the original partners of the Convo Couch, helped us out in the very beginning. We went on his YouTube for years, built our name, built our brand, and it's great that he's riding shotgun with us today. We're riding shotgun with him, however you want to figure it out.